Amnesia. So apologies that we're hopping, mid-game here. But, part of it was that there was a little bit of a technical difficulty. However, we resolved it. And thus, let the games begin, or rather, let this game come to an end soon.
Yeah, I was about to say, this is one of those matchups where sometimes it gets off to the races quite quick. I think that Odd Paladin is one of those decks where if you're not able to contain it early, it can always have some ridiculous buff and stick you out of the game. Now, with such a low life total, Stephie's clearly going to have an issue here on stabilizing the board, but there are some tools here that maybe gets it done, and I'm thinking with a top deck Deathstalker Rexar, it can completely change the game. But basically, the whole goal for Steffiee is to be able to contain boards to not being able to be buffed completely out of control, and then rely on the natural advantage you get of containing a Paladin board for long enough to be able to win you the game. At a certain point, Paladin stunts out just that little bit, and that's often enough to take the lead. But here, the dude's taken over with the level up. That's one of the ones that makes it too much.
And Steffiee trying to set up her best defense. I think she was hoping for a Misha, so that way she can stop any kind of damage. Baku is not a great draw here, but Princfancy does have a lot of ways to grab the board in this position, with Corridor Creeper being 0 mana. Very quick rundown. Stephie's Malagos Druid was banned. Princfancy's Shutterwalk Shaman's banned, so that leaves a Hakar Mill Druid, OTK Paladin, and Spell Hunter. And then Steffiee. Oh, actually, I think the POVs might be switched, because Steffiee should be the one on Odd Paladin, and Princfancy should be the one playing OTK
You
Paladin.
are correct. I'm looking at the lineups at the moment.
Yes. So the POVs are actually completely switched. Apologies once again. It is the opposite. So Princfancy is the Spell Hunter.
Yeah.
And now Steffiee is the one hovering over the Righteous Protector and making this Corridor Creeper play.
Well, there you go. That does change the dynamic of it. So, take into account everything we just said, but just switch the names up.
Yep. Deathstalker Rexar is not even enough. It's not even enough at that point.
Yeah, it's a 4/7 sitting on board, huh?
Yeah. Is there a way to finagle this to make it possible to survive? Freezing Trap and Kill Command is what I'm looking at right now.
Well, that would clear off one thing, and then the Leot clears off another. Yeah, it's enough to technically stay alive, which is a big deal.
I think that's the only play available.
Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, Step 4. Yep, that's the one. So now, with being alive, it's alive for how long? Again, apologies for the perspective on this. Steffiee is the one on Odd Paladin at the moment. The perspectives are not correct as you see them on screen. So Steffiee here with the Stonehill Defender draw, that is fantastic for this setup. Just a little bit of extra gas, a big minion that might be able to save these little 1/1 dudes for a turn or so. I'm thinking Belligerent Gnome is actually just a totally fine take here to try to just get enough on board to fight through this. In Stephie's spot, I don't think she needs to take the risk versus a Freezing Trap with this Corridor Creeper. It's threatening lethal on its own. So I think you can just bide your time, wait a turn or so, and then go for it from there.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think the Belligerent Gnome allows you to hero power and get multiple targets to potentially trigger secrets that are problematic. Deck lists are open, so it is available for you to know the Freezing Trap's in there, and I think she agrees. There's also something worth bringing up, too. One of the new cards in Princfancy's hand is Revenge of the Wild, a 2-mana rare hunter spell that summons back all the beasts that died this turn, but that's exactly what it is. It's a combo card, and it's not something that immediately or inherently enables you to do anything without some other card to support it, like Unleash the Hounds. So even if Princfancy goes for this Rock Delar and he picks up the second Eaglehorn Bow, I think that's just it. There's nothing else that Princfancy can do, and that's largely just due to the fact that a lot of these cards are okay by themselves, but they get overwhelmed by the Odd Paladin.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's the level up turn that does it, right? You look at the way this game panned out, and a level up early on was a crushing blow in terms of the life total. You need just those few extra life points to survive for maybe a turn or so to stabilize. But Hunter does not do a fantastic job of coming from behind. It does a pretty good job of staying even when your opponent's just playing pretty powerful minions one at a time. It's the wide board states I think that Hunter really suffers from. So perhaps something to think about as you're playing Spell Hunter. Are there easier ways to shore that up without sacrificing too much?
Yeah, even though lineups might feel like it could be the weak point, you talk to Amnesiac long enough and he'll convince you that even Shaman is fantastic. Now let's go into game number 2. We have The combo control paladin. Many people call it OTK Death Knight Paladin just for, archetype nomenclature for things like HS Replay. And then Steffiee has Control Priest featuring the Dragons.
Apologies for the hand perspective. We'll get that fixed as quickly as we can. But in the meantime, this is one of those matchups where I feel like Steffiee can get in a bit of trouble here. For all intents and purposes, Princfancy's got a combo-oriented deck. It's going to take its time trying to delay board positions, and the ultimate goal is to get Uther in play, the hero card. And as you've upgraded to the 4 Horsemen at that point, what you want to do is you want to return those to your hand in some capacity, and that often involves like Brewmaster and Zola. And as you build up independently ones in your hand, you get to play 3 and then use your hero power to summon the 4th one, and that's enough to win the game. So with Timeout as the big addition, I really think that was what breathed life into this deck. It was a deck that struggled to stay alive, and now you have 2 ways to stave off dying for multiple turns towards the end of the game. Heavy cycle, and then that combo a lot of times is enough to get it done if it's not pressured super hard.
There's that one of those new cards we're talking about, Fire Tree Witch Doctor, which allows you to discover a spell if you're holding a dragon. Although it's not like these spells are specifically important in this matchup. It's great removal tools in the form of Shadow or Death, but look how desperate Steffiee feels like to get pressure going. She needs to pick Mind Games up so that she can maybe pick up Shrivala the Tiger, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, Mind Games is it's a minion, right? So, the other options are offering you reactive things and, a return one of your minions option. I think that on average, Mind Games is going to be the strongest minion you end up getting.
Is it, though, actually? I'm looking at the deck was a little bit closer, and this is a version that doesn't play Shrivala. There's actually a lot of weak minions. Loot Hoarder is surprisingly one of the better ones, because you can get, Lanessa Sunsar, you could get Righteous Protector, or Crystal Smith Kangor. Like, those things don't really do anything. At least Loot Hoarder gets you deeper into the deck to potentially pick up, like, your second Mind Blast or a Shadow Visions to help combo with that Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Right, so the thought is, does Dragon in hand matter? And I think sometimes it does, but, it's just that this 2/2 turned into a weak minion to spend mana on, was really what it boiled down to. So it just snags a little bit of extra value and gets something going. Something going is important against this deck, and especially in Steffie's position where the meat and potatoes of the deck is really the Shadow Reaper Anduin and Mind Blast. If you don't have those, fairly immediately in the matchup, it can be tough to win this one.
And you can see Princfancy, can't really deny the card draw if he wants to let his opponent stay on the board too. It's going to be tough because Priest will be able to leverage their positions very well. And you look at Dragonmaw Scorcher being picked up, that's kind of exactly what we're talking about. Allows you to damage your own minions so that things like the Cleric can even heal and draw cards. The only downside is it does open herself up to a Consecration, very cleanly removing everything but the Dragonmaw Scorcher.
I think Dragonmaw Scorcher is like one of the coolest dragons that they've made in a while. It's like a miniature Primordial Drake.
Yes. That's literally what it is, except it doesn't have taunt.
Yeah, it's miniature. It's always the big ones that are bullying people, like Primordial Drake.
Ooh. Shadow Visions picks up the second Mind Blast. It also gives a possibility of a third and potentially a fourth if the second Shadow Visions is drawn before the second Mind Blast, which would be a maximum of 22 damage with Shadow Reaper Anduin. Now, Princfancy does indeed have that Consecration pickup. Also has the equality, but is it worth using right now versus doing some other play? Seems like Princfancy does end up saving on or holding on to the coin here. I'm trying to think about ways you can dump your hand because you want to draw, but it's not like Paladin has a lot of card draw at the moment because Call to Arms will only pull out at most the Blood Mage Thanos and the Loot Hoarder remaining.
Yeah, I am a bit curious about the sequencing for Princfancy. I think that this hand is very demanding of using your mana super efficiently, and Equality I think is such a powerful card versus large minions, but Steffie's not trying to get a bunch of minions on board and take advantage of that. It's just it's like pacing for it, really. Yeah. If Dragon Priest is being able to attack you with their minions, that's usually a good sign that you're in trouble. So for Princfancy, I think it's just about really keeping minions off the board. And I think that inefficient use of the cards makes a lot of sense in that regard.
Yeah, this is one of the problems we're talking about, where it's like, now, first of all, he has hand space issues. So if he, for some reason, overdraws his only copy of Uther of the Ebon Blade, his Death Knight, then he basically just loses on the spot.
Yeah.
So he has to dump the coin in this position. But
he doesn't have to. I mean, you could just take the risk.
Okay, sorry. He would probably at least be tempted to use it.
Oh, it's very tempting. A % chance to lose automatically by overdrawing a card is a very bad feeling.
The second thing is that this is also partially why a lot of those builds for the Death Knight Paladin is to not play Youthful Brewmaster because of that problem. The Call to Arms will summon it, and you want to have things like Blood Mage Thanos and Loot Hoarder picked up, so that way it can draw deeper into your deck. And Princfancy with a very interesting coin Youthful Brewmaster number 2 being played. What do you make of this, Admirable?
Well, so the idea is that, Princfancy feels like this Crystal Smith Kangor is going to be more useful later on. And, this gets a card out of a hand, but it also doesn't, make you waste a card. It doesn't make you just coin for no reason or, make a 1/1 or what have you. The idea here for Princfancy is I need to get a card out of my hand. If I'm going to coin, I might as well make the most use of it. Being able to play Youthful Brewmaster means you exchange that card for a card that you actually can just dump later on as well. So,
yeah.
Just miniature little things really that end up happening here, where for Princfancy the big deal is that they're going to have to quality these boards pretty much turn after turn. Stephie's got Shadow Reaper Anduin online for the following turn, and that's where he's going to have to be concerned afterwards. Princfancy, that is. Steffi, she's going to just should be full steam ahead right now.
Yeah, Holy Smite is just raw damage. Everything should be added with +2 damage because of Shadow Reaper Anduin coming down next turn. And seems like that's exactly what she's gearing up for. Not to mention that this Twilight Drake's still doing a lot of damage. It's sticking onto the board for several turns now.
Yep. Kangor looks a little bit better with True Silver Champion, but this board needs to be taken care of. This is almost certainly either a Wild Pyromancer equality turn, or it is some sort of timeout True Silver Champion style of turn, and I much favor this.
Part of the problem is that even if Princfancy draws his Death Knight and getting Uther of the Ebon Blade up, he still only has 2 bounces, which means that he would have to have a token survive for the following turn, but that's going to be unlikely when your opponent has Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Yeah, it's about stabilizing life total and being able to follow up on this Anduin.
Which is why I felt like the liberal use of the second Brewmaster that you had meant that even if you did draw the Death Knight, you still kind of be in a floundering state where you can't clearly navigate toward a win condition.
Yeah, you are seeing the importance of Kangor, though. I mean, Kangor is going to pick up 2 extra healing here, and it's also a minion that Steffi needs to deal with, lest it continue to threaten more healing. So the Kangor is going to buy a pretty substantial amount of life, and with Uther drawn early on, I think that's really the one way that Princfancy can really get into this game. So now the question is, can Kangor be saved for Uther? Is that enough time that Princfancy has? He's going to get the 5 Barber initially, and then you get the 5 heal from the attack. And so in this position, the Kangor is buying so much life just from, forcing hero powers from the opponent or just forcing mana to occupy it, that I think it's the Kangor this turn, and you hope it survives for the Uther swing on the following turn.
Yeah, the bad news for Princfancy is that Steffi has the perfect response. Dragon Maw Scorcher will allow Steffi to weave in 2 hero powers and be able to deal with the Crystal with Kangor and the state of the board.
Yeah, that's pretty ideal. But, that's just part of the benefits of Priest. It's when it's facing down nominal pressure, Shadow Reaper Anduin starts to look like an all-star. It's a deck that you really need to put the pedal to the metal against, and oftentimes that's a big risk because of Dustbreaker, Psychic Scream. You got to have gas to back it up when you're going to pressure, the right Priest hand as well.
Sorry, when you say All-Star, immediately Smash Mouth starts playing in my head. And I was just rocking out.
I saw you kind of dancing.
I'm head bopping. Yeah, I was just thinking about it, and just having having Anduin walk down the street singing in the music video for Smash Mouth. Anyways,
is it me cosplaying?
What is Princfancy gonna do? He doesn't have much going on here because even if he sets up Uther of the Ebon Blade, there's not actually much going to happen because he's never going to get a turn to set it up. But he does have a timeout.
So I am curious about the Uther first. You're not going to be pressuring your opponent for damage really at all. So is the 2 extra healing ever worth it to take, or does Princfancy feel like he needs more time? And then
Right.
he's clearly feeling like he wants the healing immediately and to avoid a disaster circumstance. Right. But I think this might have been a min-maxing position. I'd be curious to see how this ends up going.
Well, he did see Steffiee pick up the
So the extra life ended up being a benefit.
Ooze.
Taking the extra life.
But,
small payoff.
Ends up working out really nicely here. And Control Priest pummeling the Death Knight Paladin. But it's a really good observation. I mean, Princfancy saw the Shadow Vision discover a card and very quickly being picked up. And it usually indicates it's a Mind Blast because that is the way the Priest will win this matchup.
Yeah, to me the indicator here is that Princfancy, he just has to pay heed to Mind Blast in this spot. If Steffie's willing to spend 8 mana to play an Anduin when she has an empty board, I think that's quite telling of the direction she intends to go. It's going to be start blasting you with damage. So I think taking the extra healing, accounting for the fact that Ooze is in the deck is a wise choice.
Yeah. At the same time, Princfancy needs to also start working on his win condition. So Ancient Brewmaster.
That's piece number 1 that's in hand.
Yeah, but still needs at least 3 more turns to pull this off, which is why I feel like calling it an OTK Paladin is very disingenuous. You do try to win in 1 turn, but the setup requirement is just so many pieces and phases.
Yeah.
And it's also volatile because things like, the hero power, it summons a horseman at random, so you can summon the same exact one.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a lower chance to end up doing that, but there definitely is that part of it. By nature, it needs to be a fairly control-heavy deck because it just needs to buy time. And as you continue to buy that time, it gives you more chances to get that right horseman. So I think that the position for Princfancy is pretty reasonable here, but Steffiee picking up Cabal Shadow Priest, there's another opportunity to start pushing here. I mean, even with just the Wild Pyromancer, opportunity was there to continue connecting with minions, but that should be probably priority number 1. How important is killing this 5/4 right now when you can steal a Righteous Protector? I would say it's quite unimportant.
Agreed. It's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, I like this direction. I think full steam ahead. Got to end it. I mean, yeah, that 5/4 is looking juicy to kill because you don't really spend resources on it. You just spend damage to base on it.
But it's not a value game.
Yeah.
It's going to be a race to the finish, especially when your opponent starts bouncing their horsemen back to their hand. You're starting to worry of whether or not you have enough time. So, both players in this spot, it's going to be dicey. Now, if Princfancy goes for a timeout now, still has an opportunity to draw a second timeout, but doesn't have that guaranteed 3rd bounce.
Yeah.
So it would have to be specifically that scenario.
The danger here for Princfancy is that Mind Blasts are closing in on victory. I mean, he's threatened for lethal technically next turn by Mind Blasts. And so the board's demanding to be cleared. Your face is demanding to be protected. There's no healing in hand. Timeout's the last real line of defense.
Yeah, it has to be timeout in this spot. But again, even if Princfancy draws the second timeout, still doesn't have that 3rd bounce.
Yeah, need the 3rd bounce and also need to roll the 3rd horseman. If he rolls one of the duplicate 2 that's already there, it doesn't work.
Yeah, but that's also assuming Priest
Mind Blast picked up.
That's assuming that Priest doesn't even clear off the horseman that stays on the board, too. I guess there's no excuses here in this spot. Nothing else to do. You can just clear off the board and pass it back to your opponent.
Yeah, with this much damage in hand, I'm actually wondering if Steffiee is afforded the luxury of just, perhaps screaming bad minions back into Princfancy's deck. Just killing off the important ones.
Yep.
And then, screaming the rest back.
Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable option for Steffiee right now, just to try to delay an impactful draw from Princfancy as long as possible.
Yeah, I like that play a lot. And I think she agrees.
Wow, tough call to make, but he's already got that horseman in hand. What's the second one going to do? That second one ends up being a fairly dead draw.
Yes.
The only benefit I could see it possibly providing is if Princfancy has a bounce and both that card, he can play that one to ensure that he does not roll that particular duplicate again. It would increase the % chance to roll one of the unique horsemen he needs, but you would need a bounce and that horseman for that to have any impact. So it's negligible at best.
And so that's why while I understand the importance of Crystal Smith Kangor, of extending the game length. It's, Princfancy doesn't have that Youthful Brewmaster, especially when it was the first one was pulled out from the call tower.
Yep. I mean, that Brewmaster now is looking paramount. If Princfancy had that in hand, we're looking at a 50% chance to win the game. If he rolls one of the non-duplicate horsemen from hand, bounces that to hand, and then timeouts, you get to play the 3 of them and then roll the 4th on the following turn. That Youthful Brewmaster being used is extremely costly in hindsight.
It's definitely one of those prime examples of, are you playing to not lose or are you trying to play to win? Or what we usually often summarize as playing to your outs. Yes, you could die to burst, and that's where often fear, doubt, stress, anxiety.
It's those feelings of, do they have it? That's like the age-old cards question. Do they have it? And yes, Stephiee does. It's a 2-0 lead for Stephiee. Just saving that one tool turns and turns ago was the difference in winning and losing this game ultimately. And Princfancy here, I think that all things considered, they made the right play. There was no way to further defend himself after this second timeout. Just had to go for the win. It's protect that horseman and then try to play the other 2 and roll the 4th.
Yeah, but it was kind of like he cornered himself in that position. Needed to rely exactly that. And, had he been able to know he would have drawn the second time out exactly that instance, well, yeah, of course he would have been able to. But that's part of it's partially why some of those players are split on decisions on how to build out this actual 30-card deck.
Yeah, 30 cards is – once you start putting together combo decks, 30 cards never feels like enough to me. I always get to, like, card 26, and I'm like, I have 9 more cards I want to put in.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 2 of this, these 3-4 legendaries, and then you're like, well, I don't have much space left for the actual tech. Especially when you're playing things like odd and even decks. This looks to be Stephiee queuing the Druid, but I thought Druid was banned.
Yeah, according to the overlay of the notes that we have, the Druid was banned away, but the players are playing without
stopping.
Without hesitation.
So it must have been a mistake on the bracket? Or do we have the POV switched? Because maybe Stephiee... No, it's OTK Paladin.
Yeah, it's an OTK Paladin.
Right.
So
we'll clarify that in a second. In the meantime, we can talk a little bit about this particular matchup. So the list that Stephiee is playing is pretty stock. It's got Lich King and Alex Straza, as well as Dream Petal Florist with Malagos. So just pretty much the regular top end you've come to expect. Less anti-aggro and more greed to beat the slower decks.
It's just a strong Druid deck. I mean, this is like the tried and true Druid shell that exists right now. It's all the good Druid cards and then the big cards package at the end of the game. This is a tough deck to beat. And we have gotten word that this is the correct iteration right now. Shaman was the ban.
So he banned Even Shaman.
Yeah, so Even Shaman was banned away in the series from Stephiee, and she's now got Malagos Druid left with 3 tries. Now, this matchup in particular, I don't have a ton of experience on. It's OTK Paladin, or as Dan wants to call it, I guess 4TK Paladin. The big premise to this is that Princfancy can have an advantage because he's allotted the ability to time out on the turns where Stephiee is, apparently going to Malagos.
Yeah.
I'd say the one pitfall to that is the card draw mechanisms that the 2 decks provide. There's very few ways for Princfancy to really interact with how Stephie's combo is going to work with Malagos, and I think Stephie's got a lot of ways to interact with how Princfancy is going to work, which is just namely the pressure side. So the onus really on Princfancy to be able to defend himself on key turns, where Stephie's just, kind of going about the motions.
Yeah, Stephiee feels so relaxed that she's even, saving the coin. Like, she had the opportunity to coin out the twig with things like Malagos, but recognizing even if I swing with 5 turns, I probably still am going to hold on to this twig, last through ability charge anyways. Can take her time, and with Ultimate Infestation, should be able to dig through the remainder of her deck and ultimately combo the Paladin down in 1 turn. So now Princfancy with the twig and that, nourish for mana crystals has to be getting them sweating a little bit.
Yeah, and this is a lot of nourish is just a lot of ramp in these slower matchups where not really being pressured, not a lot going on, and suddenly you're facing an Arcane Tyrant, a 3 charge twig.
Okay.
And you start looking at this and you go, I do need to pressure. Like, there are times that Princfancy can win with pressure, due to Lanessa and due to True Silver Champion and just, minions in general. But that is a very ambitious game plan. And so really the key is being able to take advantage of Twig with a Spike Ridge Steed.
I mean, I'd be even tempted in that spot to not even address the Arcane Tyrant, maybe just try to pressure Druid life total. But part of the problem is that Druid is one of the best classes, if not the best class, at bouncing back from a low life total.
Yeah, it's also just one of the best at punishing you when it keeps a minion in play. Druid doesn't run a ton of minions, and so if you're able to keep them off board, it does mitigate a lot of the options that they have.
What do you think about Dream Plateau Florist in this spot? Hitting Alex or Malygos, I think, would be very good against Paladin.
I was thinking towards the Coin Alexstrasza line.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I'm thinking that way is because I want to be able to Florist on Malygos and then, be able to go from there. But I don't think that's really necessary in this situation. Stephiee might just be interested in dumping hand too. You really want to cast Ultimate Infestation. But you also really want to Alexstrasza your opponent. But you also really want to get the Twig active, but you really also want to stay alive. Like, there's a lot of things going on with planning your next 3 turns when you get into situations like this. And so I think that, hand dumping is probably a pretty large priority at the moment.
I can get down with that. Has the opportunity to even toss out a Naturalize. There's not many big minions, actually.
Well, if they naturalize right away, that means there's no attack on the Twig. So I actually like conserving the naturalize and waiting for a better spot. But you see, Princfancy not going to waste time.
Yeah, there's not many buffs played. It was just Spike Ridge Steed, but just needs to get as much pressure as possible. Not attacking with the weapon.
Yeah, the no attack with the weapon is extremely surprising to me given Princfancy's hand. You have a second True Silver rolling, you have Uther rolling. Like, you probably just need to slam these and start attacking. Damage is still damage.
That Gluttonous Ooze for Stephiee has a lot of opportunity. If it's not this True Silver, it could be the next or the Uther Blade.
Yeah, definitely an unusual choice with the Gluttonous Ooze in Druid as well. This is clearly something that's dedicated to being able to fight in mirror matches, being able to have an opposing Druid's Twig exposed changes the dynamic of that matchup a lot. And so for Princfancy, part of leaving that True Silver there might be to try to bait out the Acidic Swamp Ooze and then use the Uther later on.
Yeah. And had Stephiee be able to swing the previous turn, she'd be on 1 charge right now. At maybe 3 or 2 less life, and would be threatening Princfancy to immediately use a timeout now. But Princfancy probably still even feels a little bit uncomfortable, but at the same time, your opponent hasn't shown a Dream Petal Florist, hasn't had 1 charge remaining, so because Princfancy is given this 1 window of opportunity, he doesn't have to play timeout in this spot.
Yeah, that you're safe for 1 turn. The biggest burst would be Malygos and Double Moonfire. So you have at least 1 turn to make a difference. And so paying heed to, spreading play, mind control tech, anything like that with this turn, and then you start applying the pressure later on, pretty much anticipating that Uther's going to come down on the following turn. I think those are really some of the big factors here is that, Princfancy also can recover post-Alexstrasza with Uther or the Ebb on hand.
I don't understand the trade, though. You had to pressure the Druid that also just showed you branching paths and is very clearly setting up for Ultimate Infestation.
Well, I think that's part of the goal here for Princfancy now is the alternative game plan where you force Stephiee to have a lot of combo damage rather than a little bit, and he's afforded that luxury, I think, with Uther in that situation. And then if the game starts to go deep enough, you can use your timeouts to offset your opponent as you're making progress toward that combo game plan. I actually think the trade lines up really well for Princfancy because I don't necessarily think he needs the pressure, but I do think that he needs to be able to have that recovery option available.
Whew. 5 to the face, forcing Princfancy to immediately react.
And that's the thing. It forces the reaction. I think it's quite wise to go that direction. You're looking at Malygos, you're looking at drawing 5 cards. Why wouldn't you deal the 5 damage to have, that little bit of extra Malygos assist? And this is no other play, really, for Princfancy. And do not touch this 5/5 with your face. You need as much life total as possible right now.
Yeah, I completely agreed. Plus, your opponent is down to 8. And again, it's like a lot of those small things. Had you attack face with the weapon, had you attack with a 3/3, it just feels a lot more reachable. Right now, as soon as Stephiee is able to remove this weapon through Gluttonous Ooze and maybe clean up the state of the board here, it just feels like you're that much farther away.
Well, Lich King is a bit of a negative draw where this is concerned. Now Stephie's looking at not being able to play double Malagos all the time, not necessarily being able to discount Malagos and use the swipe before using the Twig and Ultimate Infestation. That one Lich King draw really changed the dynamic of this. So it's a pretty easy ooze, and I think that the follow-up is still Dream Petal Florist here and go for the Gusto, but the position is much more uncomfortable, and with the 2 timeouts still available in deck, plus the extra weapon that's there, plus the progress from the Horseman, there's a lot of angles of attack from Princfancy right now. This is a lot closer, really, than it looks like.
Yeah, which is why it goes back to that question I was saying before. Dream Petal Florist hitting Alexstrasza and Malagos isn't that bad thing when you have a Twig.
Yeah.
Because she even had the coin, so you could Alexstrasza coin Malagos, then snap the Twig, and then do anything you want.
Yeah, and she's going to snap the Twig right now and play the Lich King, ensure that the Malagos gets the buff. And this is quite wise as well, I think, just because it ends up giving you the option to just play the Malagos by itself and swipe on that turn. So a second swipe draw is super impactful, and any of the Lich King damage that's castable is impactful as well.
Oh!
But you should not be drawing
Oh my gosh! Wow! That was a bullet dodged.
Yeah, when you're going to Wild Growth on your Dream Petal Florist turns and you have the ideal minion in hand, don't draw an extra card to avoid that disaster exactly. The extra card you draw this turn is never going to change what you do, and that single spot could change the outcome of the game, though. That is a mistake you want to avoid.
Not punished, though. We're okay. We're all good. But potential disaster. No easy access to a board clear either. No consecration.
It's like you said, though. Like when your back's against the wall in spots where you don't necessarily anticipate it being so, I think that's when you're most susceptible to making a judgment in error.
Yeah.
Or an error in judgment, rather.
I mean, I kind of want to just say it here. I think Princfancy traded too much. It's like he would actually have lethal. Had he was able to save a couple minions, he quality push. He's so close. If he was able, even if he just hit face with that one Web True Silver instead of trading with the Arcane Tyrant, which he had like a Spiker Steve minion on board. This is a bounce?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a bounce. And you're fearing for your life at the moment. Not having a way to follow up on the equality is a huge deal. Having an equality your own board is never a very exciting thing to do, I guess.
Branching Path number 2 also picked up, giving Steffi even more ability to stay alive in this spot. Let's count damage as well while we're at it. So Malagos, Swipe, Moonfire, Hero Power. Swipe, Moonfire is 15 damage. Direct to the opponent.
19 available this turn, plus the Hero Power. Oh, I guess the +2 from the Branching Pass is the maximum, so 21 maximum.
22? You'd swipe Moonfire the face and your Hero Power down the 1/1, and then you would have 7 to the face. So that's
I see.
22.
Yeah, 22.
Yeah. So not quite lethal, but close. For the draw. Oh, is it the draw for the win? I think so. It would have.
Yeah, she's going for the second swipe here to, have a lethal presentation. But lethal presentation is still, very much being made with the addition of this 4/4 on board, and now with the Malagos at 0, you're looking at Floop being lethal.
Wow.
You're looking at another swipe being lethal. There's a lot of things here that Princfancy has to piece together correctly, and so.
Now he's probably going to feel like he has to time out in this spot. Now that Pyromancer's drawn, but no quality to go with it, well, he doesn't have a board clear to stay at 26 life.
You could also see it the opposite way as well. Like my opponent got a discount with the Florist and didn't combo me. And what's the second one really going to do? They use the Twig as well for development. I think he can be quite confident that it's like a Malagos or a Floop that's discounted in this position. But I think there's a lot of times where he can be quite confident that it's not a combo that's in hand right now.
I think this is a necessary risk. But is he dead?
Well, you can see he's quite stressing out about it. It's the same horseman.
Same horseman.
So the bounce doesn't work. So if you're going to horseman on a turn, something to think about is maybe you start with it, as that could impact your future plays.
Bounce the Youthful Brewmaster. I think
bouncing the duplicate one is fine with the number of bounces in hands because you can play that to ensure he doesn't get another one of those, and then bounce the fresh one from there.
That's fair. Oh man,
That's
Moonfire has to be it.
That's 21 just from hand, and then 7 sitting on board.
Yeah, I think the timing of this deck. I think it gets to show you like what we're talking about when we compare Timeout to Ice Block. Ice Block is just universally played because you need to survive and eventually get it out of your hand. Timeout requires the precision of understanding the game state based off the clues that your opponents give and also the context of your hand. And this time around, I think this all could have been circumvented had Princfancy been a little bit more aggressive. I can completely understand they wanting to remove certain minions to avoid Druid leveraging their damage and removal tools, but you had a Spike Steed minion and a Taunt minion. Why do you need to remove a 4/4? Had you been able to swing face with that one-turn Truce over Champion, or kept the 3/3 alive and gone face,
Right about now.